Well, Tom, as we were talking about before we started the recording here, uh, I asked you, do you have anything in your life where somebody told you you could not? And the blessing was that no, you have had, I mean, you're Zig Ziglar's son. You were surrounded by the people he surrounded himself by, and you've been given encouragement. I am much the same way. I do have one single solitary, but pretty good example. You ready?
I'm ready.
All right. I in 2000 and 2000 and what would have been 6, I think we bought some land. I was not in a good place financially. I was not stable. We bought some land and decided to build a house, and we were going to build an alternative style house. And we decided we were going to design it. We were going to be the general contractors, and I was even going to do some of the labor. I had some guys, some well-meaning guys who kind of did an intervention with me, some friends of mine. They said, Kevin, to do something like that, you need time, money, and know-how, or at least some bit of all of those things. They said, you have no money, you have no time because you're trying to make money, and you have no know-how because at that point in time, I had built a set of shelves. That was it. That's the extent of my contracting knowledge. And they were totally right and totally justified in that. I had support from a couple friends, and other than that, I didn't even share it. And we went and did it, and nothing pointed to the validity of it, other than I had a good track record of making things happen and not failing in things. That was it. It did happen only by the grace of God. I didn't do it and come to the end and feel like I proved it. I mean, again, they were right in what they saw. But it was one where I distinctly realized what people listening to the podcast and heard Zig's intro message talking about Lou Holtz. I experienced that where somebody said, man, I don't think this is a good fit. I don't think you really have what it takes necessarily to do this in all wisdom, but I wanted it. I wanted it. I was committed to it, and I made it happen. And I say that, Tom, and I don't want to, as you know, we don't ever want to discount good wisdom, but we've got that. I don't know how would you say what that balance is between listening to good wisdom, counting the costs and knowing what you're up against, and then over here doing what you feel committed to, just like Lou Holtz did in the story. You've seen these stories happen. Oh, you may have seen these happen more than anybody else I know, actually.
Our kind of what we do and the way Dad started the business and the way we continue to do is to give people hope and encouragement, inspire them and motivate them and let them know, hey, you know what? If you make your mind up and you decide to do it, you're pretty much unstoppable. I mean, there's some physical things that can happen that could keep you from doing something, but building a house is just a great example. Is if you put your mind to it and you do whatever it takes, it's going to get done.
Yeah.
It might take longer than you want. You might cut more fingers than you wanted in the process,
Yep.
the
Yep.
scars of learning, but that's okay. And so the reason I like this subject is, uh, right now it comes down to like two areas. We either get told we can't do something or we're told we don't belong. Right. And who gets to decide whether you belong or not? And there's a powerful Zig story that kind of comes in along this. When he was 12 years old, growing up in Yazoo City, Mississippi, his family was the second poorest family in that little town. And this is, right after the Great Depression. So this
Yeah.
is like 1938. And one of his buddies said, hey, let's go swimming. And his buddy was wealthy. His friend, their family belonged to the country club. Dad gets to the country club earlier than his friend. And the rule is you can't get into the pool unless you're with a member. Well, it's 100 degrees. It's the Mississippi summer. Dad's 12 years old. He's got he's looking at the pool. His friend's going to be there in any second. And so he jumps in the pool anyway. And one of the members grabbed Dad by the ear, basically, how they get kids and they pull him by the ear, pulled him out of the pool, kicked him out of the club, even though he knew that his buddy was going to be there in a few minutes, right? It was a positional power thing. So Dad made a vow. And his vow was is he would never touch foot on that country club again, right? Because they kicked him out. He didn't understand. He was a young boy, not knowing. And then he said, someday I'm going to have a pool bigger than the one at the Yazoo City Country Club. And I want you to know, where I grew up in Dallas, we moved there in 68. And by 1970, he had that swimming pool built. And it was 48 feet long, 2 feet longer. I guess he had a friend go and measure the pool at Yazoo City Country Club. I don't know. But the point is sometimes when somebody says you can't do something or you don't belong, that's exactly the motivation you need to go make it happen.
Yep. And there are, I mean, we've got, yeah, that to prove you can do something. It is a powerful motivator. It's not always the most healthy motivator, but it is a powerful motivator to be told you can't do something. It's just so powerful. Again, like in the story that Zig told about Lou Holtz, when you have somebody that you respect, it's daunting. You know, and again, back to these guys, they were totally right. They had seen me be successful. They knew about me. It wasn't a diss against me, but they said, man, for the things that you need, we just don't see you having an abundance of those things. And that was wise counsel. But, you know, once we get it on the table, we got to look and say, hey, do I feel called to this, committed to this? Is my motive strong enough? Well, here, let me go through some. We've got some great stories, and my team conglomerated some of them into topics. This one has to do with money. A lot of people who listen to us also listen to Dave Ramsey. These folks are talking about his line of work here. Wayne says, it is what I am privileged to help others do now. You can't become financially independent. You can't live without debt. You can't go to college without debt. You can't pay your house off or buy a car without debt, and on and on and on. But here we are. And I asked him, so that's your story. He says, yeah, we have been weird, which is what Ramsey talks about, for almost 20 years, living like, that's Ramsey's tagline, live like no one else so you can live like no one else. Isn't that interesting that with debt that we often don't get the support from our culture, from our society, friends, family, to be debt free? You have to be a weirdo. Marcia says, I'm debt free. And I heard comments like, it's not possible. That's the way society is. The poor get poorer. And I believe and wanted to live what God said. The only debt I should owe is love. That one is, it's a harsh commentary on our culture that being debt free is not believed much. It's not thought that that's the norm. And you have to be a weirdo to live that way, to become debt free, especially if you're, you know, making pennies, everyone count. To live that way is difficult.
Yeah, you know, it's just ingrained in the Western culture of consumerism that, you know what, why wait? Why suffer now? Go ahead, you know, buy the new car, buy whatever it is that you want, pay for it later. And without even realizing it, then we are then required to do things and to continue in an area where we may not want to. And then yet on the other side of the coin, with the lie is, well, you can't do that without debt. And yet every day people do it without debt. You know, I remember when we moved from one house to the other, and the people who bought our house, they were from another country and they paid cash for it. And I was thinking, wow, that's pretty cool. How did they do that? And you know what? They were doubling up. It was a much larger family than ours moving in, and in-laws and things like that. But I'm sitting here going, you know what? They're teaching Americans the American dream.
Yep.
Right? Because how does it get started? How do we do it? We say, okay, this is what I want to accomplish. And other people say, oh no, you can't do it. What you've got to do is stand back and say, watch me.
Yeah.
Watch me.
Yes. You know, finances here. This is an interesting one too, because we did have some people. I mean, I premised this of where have you had success, where somebody told you couldn't. And I had some people testify to things that they went after that didn't work out as well. But the store or the testimony that they got from the redemption of that, the knowledge of that. I'm even talking about Dave Ramsey. I mean, where does he speak from? It's from a gigantic failure, from bankruptcy and millions that he lost. Well, one of Dave's dear buddies is Dan Miller, my dad, of 48 Days of the Work You Love fame. And he says, your mom told me not to buy a fitness center. I knew nothing about it, didn't enjoy the environment, but I bought it anyway. And he said, showed her, didn't I? It only cost me $430,000 in debt to repay. Man, I remember that acutely, Tom. I was high school, just starting high school when he did that. And it was fun, man. And my dad owned a health club. I used to go over there and work out for free and have my buddies come over and whatnot. And then he lost his shirt literally. And I remember, I think it was my junior year in high school, going out to shop for clothes for the coming school year with my mom. And I paid for him because they didn't have the money at the time. He was doing all he could not to declare bankruptcy, which he didn't. And it took him a long time to repay that. Though I can say he taught me how to work. He's the reason that I had any money to buy my clothes with. And David Powers comments that he says, yeah, Dan, but you earned a great story out of that one. The amount of wisdom that he got from that, it's like getting an MBA. You can go spend it at school or you can go lose it in business. Where are you going to learn more? Arguable. Here's a couple on schooling, education. Tony Chung, he says, his focus was being an artist. In high school, my best friend couldn't draw as well as I could, but he worked hard at school. He loved problem solving. He had a passion for origami and the Japanese culture, plus a faith in God and parents who followed Proverbs 22:6. After university and the typical workforce, he decided to work as a professional origami artist. Now he's one of the best in the world. I am envious of all his success in a congratulations, brother sort of way. But part of me wonders how my life would have turned out had I sought the kingdom of God first and foremost and followed his designed purpose for me a whole lot sooner. John Skipworth replied under that to Tony. He says, man, I wonder the same thing almost daily. And, Tom, when you look at, now he's talking about an artist, and I come from the sports world. And I remember realizing, because I would see guys come into the sport, especially young kids, and see some that were massively talented. And I was privy to a world of the arts as well, and see people come in there and realize a lot of times the best artist, the best athlete naturally often doesn't always, they're not always the one that ends up on the podium because they can't pull it together. Just like this, Tony says, I was a better artist, but he didn't put in the work. He didn't do the Malcolm Gladwell outliers, 10,000 hours and hone his craft. I think a lot of times the people we see at the top, they're not the best, but they were good. And then they did the work and they were able to bring it together. Man, especially artists. I have seen so many amazing artists who can't get their lives and businesses in order enough to bring their art to fruition, which I think it was, Seth Godin said, then you're not an artist. If you can't bring it to us, you're not an actual artist, which is, that's daunting, but true.
Speaking of Seth, he writes a blog post every day, and I don't know how many years he's done it without fail.
As long as I can remember.
It's over 10 years, I believe. But basically what he said was this. He said, if you take a small category, something that really interests you, that you want to be known for, and you spend 100 hours in it, reading and researching and learning, then you can elevate. All right. You can be one of the leading influencers and experts in your area. Imagine spending 1,000 hours on it. What would that then do? And his point was, is 20 hours a week for a year, and you are in that rare position that very, very few people ever put in the time, energy, or effort. Yep. And so when we think of it that way, golly, how do I get to be the top? You know what? It's putting in time every single day, mastering that. And so it used to be that the hard part was going and finding the information. The hard part was learning what to do. The hard part was getting the right kind of mentor. You know what? That's the easy part now. The only thing that's left is the commitment to do it every single day. The Lou Holt story that we've been referring to is what's on your heart. A lot of times people will come to me and they'll say, I really feel like God wants me to do this. And a lot of times I think they ask the wrong question. You see, they ask, well, should I do this? Right? Is this the right thing for me to do? And let me just tell you, if God's telling you to do something in your heart, you go to the experts and you ask them how to do it. Not should you do it. Right. And that's where we get derailed in our life is we know what we're built for. We've got this inclination and we start off in it and we might even get some traction early on. The obstacles come and then we ask around, should I do this? And the better question would be, who should I ask? Who knows how to do it? It's the how at that point. Dad was never really focused on should I, because he got his directions and his standard from the highest standard of all, God's word, and he knew in his heart what he was good at, and so he applied himself to that. And people gave him bad advice all the time, and guess what? He just didn't listen to him. He went for it.
Okay, we're going to stick right here, Tom, because you just brought up something that is near and dear to my heart in this world of personal development, self-improvement that we are in. And you talked about, risk, and we so often look at these endeavors. So everybody here is talking about, here's something that I wanted to do, and somebody told me I couldn't do that. And then we're always weighing the risk. What is the risk of going out and doing that? And the question I love to ask is, what is the risk of not doing that, of not doing it? That has been such a primary motivator for me for so long. I mean, even back to my house thing. Why did I do it? I felt such a conviction of the environment I wanted my kids to grow up in, and feared not being able to afford it till after the fact, after they've already grown up and gone. And that was the motivating factor of why I said, we've got to do it now. And what if it's hard? What if it's tragically hard? It's worthwhile. I mean, I had that motive. What's the risk of not doing it? Is we're going to stay in an environment that I just don't feel is optimal for my kids. It wasn't terrible. It was first world problems. We were still up here in the mountains of Colorado, but it was the risk of not doing it. Number one. Number two, you just mentioned the hardships, and I wrote down the obstacles. That is probably the number one. It was you saying, when people get into things, starts getting hard, and they ask, gosh, should I have done this? Is this really the right decision? We watch as a culture. We're addicted to watching shows and movies. And the primary premise of most, especially movies, most of the epic movies that we all flock to, is, as Donald Miller said, a character who wants something and they overcome conflict to get it. That is a story we watch over and over and over. That's the stories in the Bible. God says, Moses, go take the people out of Egypt. And the first thing they run into is the Red Sea. And if Moses was like any of us, he would go, I must not have heard God right. That was a mistake. Instead of us looking and going, no, we should expect that. So if we're going to embark on something, anything worthwhile, we are going to hit not a challenge, but we're going to hit what seems like an insurmountable obstacle, which is, again, what we love to go to the movies and see a character do. Here's a character and he's in the corner. There's 50 bad guys and all he has is a toothbrush. How's he going to get out of this? I mean, we love to watch that because it speaks to our humanity. And yet in our real lives, we think that if it's something we are supposed to do, especially I'm going to harp on the religious faction. If we think, God called me to do it, and then we see an obstacle, the first thing we do is question that I must not have heard right, instead of going, no, I should expect this. I'm going to go, God called me to do this. I'm going to step out, and I'm waiting for the first insurmountable, objective, obstacle. And then back to you, Tom, what should we do? Go find wisdom and say, how can I do this? I love
That's
it.
right. Dad said in his quotes on goal setting, he said, achieving the goal is great, but the thing that's even better is who you become in the process of achieving the goal. And I listened to an online video from a guy named Graham Cook, and he talks about this idea. He says, in the language of heaven, in heaven, there are no problems. They don't even use the word problem. Everything's a possibility. And so one of the things that we need to do is we need to change our idea of what a problem is into a possibility. Yeah. And so he gave three P's that I love. He said, look, every problem comes with a promise and a provision. And so from a believer standpoint, hey, you know what? The promise and the provision is always bigger than the problem. And so instead of getting distraught and discouraged and upset about the problem, we should get excited about the problem, because the problem creates a bigger promise and provision as we go through that. And a lot of times they're meant to elevate us. They're meant to take us above and over, not just through it. And this is, so young people come to me. Okay. And there's two, or people who are deciding on, what life do I go for? What career do I pursue? If I go to college, which college? And if I choose a career, which career? And so I give some very general guidelines in that. And the first thing is you got to know yourself and your aptitude, what you love to do, some gifts and talents that you have. Maybe take some personality tests, maybe get some profiles done to see, what would be simple and easy for you versus other things that come natural. And that'll tell you where to look. Okay. And then you pick the one that looks the best to you right now, and you go into it 100%, knowing full good and well that your course may change a little bit, right? You may start off being, wanting to be a doctor, and then you end up saying, no, I want to be a research scientist. And the next thing you know, you're in another field 3 or 4 down. It's all related to the journey, but you wouldn't have gotten there if you hadn't gone in 100%.
Yeah.
And so here's the encouragement. Whatever you do, when you do it the right way, right, you can make what you do the center of the bullseye. It's not like there's 5 schools to pick from and there's only one that's perfect. That's not true. All 5 will work, but it's who you are and how you apply yourself in that particular school that makes the difference. Kevin, I've had the privilege of staying in that hay bale house that you built.
Yes, you have.
And I think, you know what? I'm just telling everybody it is pretty awesome. And what's interesting is that what the rest of the world would go, you're doing what? I look at it and go, why isn't everybody doing that? Of course, at different climates, there might be different building materials to use, but for where you live, it's the most energy efficient. It's the most durable. It's got an amazing living space. You can create inside of it anything you want. In other words, it's got all the upsides of any other house and none of the downsides that a lot of them have. And so I look at it and I go, why isn't everybody doing it? Well, it's because the world says fit into the lie instead of, Dad said this, Zig Ziglar said, success is the maximum utilization of the abilities that God gave you. Right. So if you feel like you've been called to the path that's not well trodden, hey, maybe that's where the maximum utilization of your abilities is going to happen. That's where you need to go.
And there's, in my other podcast, the True Life podcast, we talked about, of course, we're talking about health and wellness, and we talked in one show, we dedicated the whole show to what I think is, in my experience, is the number one deterrent for people living and walking out the health and wellness oriented lifestyle that they want. And it's cultural pressure. That in and of themselves, individually, do they have what it takes to choose the right foods, to cook the right foods, to exercise, to go to sleep at a good time, to get up at a good time, to do all these things? Yes. And yet the cultural pressure, especially to eat different, if we just look at that, just to eat different is difficult. I, as a, lifetime, primarily vegetarian, I've got kids who are vegan. It's a pain in the butt culturally. And so I'm not trying to sugarcoat that. That is one of the biggest pressures. And so when you go to, the house that I built, this big straw bale house, and there's so many things that I've seen, amazing business practices through my time, that you read books that are written on and wonder, why does everyone not do this? And so to what you said, it's just not the norm. It's not the norm. We are so imprisoned to the norm. And I say we, because I mean me too. It is difficult. It's tiring. Also say sometimes I admittedly get tired of bucking the system. And so I know, I don't know. I don't know why everybody wouldn't build a house, especially up here where I live, like that, but it's not the norm. It takes a little bit more effort, and you got to be weird. Back to Dave Ramsey's live like no one else. You can live like no one else. You talked about school, Tom. Jen Underwood, she said, my high school guidance counselor told me I definitely would not get accepted to Vanderbilt, so I shouldn't even apply. I did get in. I graduated cum laude, and it was one of the best decisions of my life. And she says, sidebar, that guidance counselor was clearly in the wrong line of work. Who says that kind of thing to someone? And I do feel like, it's a place to say apologies for humanity. You can make a citizen's arrest, supposedly. Can I apologize for humanity and for all the people who suffered at the hands of somebody who said you can't do it. Now, again, back to the guys who talked to me about my house, they didn't say that. They didn't put me down. They didn't diminish me. They did just say, my gosh, looking at conventional wisdom, I don't see how you're going to do that. But I think what Jen's attesting to and what a lot of people got was somebody who just said, you know what? I don't see testimony to your acumen to do this. You can't do it. Just lower your expectations in essence. And thank goodness for the people who didn't. I mean, I wish that counselor had said, my gosh, you don't seem to have the grades that normally would fit in with somebody who's going to get into Vanderbilt. But man, if you're going to stick to it and go seek counsel and do the work, can you get in? Of course you can, but it may take you a little bit more. I mean, I do appreciate that, to say, if I wanted to be a sumo wrestler, I hope somebody wouldn't say it's impossible, but they might say, Kevin, you're almost 50. You're not the biggest, bulkiest kind of guy. Going to be difficult. You're going to have more work cut out for you than somebody else. You're just laughing at the picture of me as a sumo wrestler, aren't
you? Yeah. And the 140-pound class, there we go.
Yeah. Thanks for that. Thanks for that. Tom, Jen goes on to say, she has another example, someone once in her inner circle. And I want to point that out. So she has a guidance counselor and then somebody in her inner circle. I mean, Tom, you're in my inner circle. Told her that she'd never be able to follow through or do a commitment to the Avon 39. I wasn't familiar with that. It's a fundraising effort. The first year she raised $3,600 and only needed $1,800 to participate. And she says, I owned those 39 miles. I walked a total of 8 years and raised nearly $25,000 for the program. I was super proud of myself for that. I want to hold up the gravity, Tom, because we don't want people just discounting any negative, or any constructive criticism, but we have to weigh, is it really constructive? But just to hold up the gravity, because we're not sitting here saying, if anybody tells you can't do it, just don't listen to them. And if it is somebody like a high school guidance counselor, somebody who's looking at your data, they've got insight. This isn't just off the cuff. Or somebody in your inner circle, like a spouse or a family member or somebody that you have trust in, that you respect, tells you you can't do something, you shouldn't do something, that we can't just flippantly dismiss that. We have to weigh that. And I don't think we can't have it impact us. And yet we also have to say that person is a person, just like Lou Holtz is, head coach. And this guy knew what he's talking about. And he audited Lou and said, man, I think you should find another line of work. He was totally wrong, but maybe he wasn't out of line. And I don't have some perfect formula to balance that, Tom.
Yeah. This reminds me of the story. We have a lady who's one of our Ziglar Legacy certified speakers. Her name is Mahongo Fumbuelo. And I met her when she was from Darwin, Australia. And before that, her family had to flee Africa for political persecution. So she's almost like a refugee into Darwin, Australia. And she comes to our Ziglar certification and she's there and she is amazing. I mean, she's super articulate. She's got this smile that lights up the room, very good on her feet, and fantastic, just a natural speaker and trainer. And when she goes to graduate, everybody does a little speech and she starts talking, and about 3 seconds into it, she starts crying. And the ladies would call this an ugly cry. I mean, she is just crying. And she gets her composure back and she says, I need to tell you something. She said, a year ago in my company, I was voted on by my peers as the most valuable employee. And she goes, it's so cool, right? Your whole team recognizes you as that, right? Leadership doesn't do that. Well, a few months after that, the company had a job opening, and the job opening was for a corporate trainer. And it was for all kinds of training, technical training, personal development. And they, and I applied. She said, I applied for that role. That was my heart. I wanted to speak. I wanted to train. I wanted to coach. I wanted to pour into people. And so I applied for that position. They told me it would be 3 or 4 months before they filled it, but they had my resume. And so then she says, a couple of months later, her whole team's meeting in the corporate offices, the managing director's there, and they're talking about their plans for the next year. And after they got through with the plans, Mahongo said, I raised my hand and I looked at the managing director and I said, look, everybody here knows that I've applied for this training position internally, but I just want our team to know if there's a skill set that you need, if there's some sort of training that would help you do better in whatever role you're in, just tell me. I'll go research it. I'll learn it. I'll bring it back between now and then. And in front of her peers, the managing director looked at Mahongo and said, Mahongo, you will never train our team. You were not cut out for it. You don't have the skills. You don't have the personality. You don't have the training. You will never do this. So think about this. This is her dream, okay? She's been voted by her peers as the most valuable employee, and she gets put down by a person of authority in that meeting. And she told me later, she said, Tom, I didn't know what to do. I just sat down, didn't know what to say. And as I walked back to my office, she said, am I going to quit? Am I going to strike back? Am I, going to sit in the corner and give up? That's when she made the decision to come over and go through that training. Well, at that point, when she told that story, you could hear a pin drop. And I said, Mahongo, here's the deal. Nobody in the world's better at this than you. You're a natural, you're gifted. You've got what it takes. You came, right? And she'd already made that decision. She believed enough in herself that her big boss, who had all the authority, it just put steel in her spine. And she came. And I said, look, Mahongo, I'm coming to Australia. We're going to do an event together in your hometown. So a year and a half later, I went there and we did this big event. Now, here is the coolness of the story. After that, she's an award-winning Toastmaster speaker in Australia. She travels all over the world speaking and training. She's got her own business, uber successful. And then about a year and a half ago, she sent me an email. Her old company, the one that she left, sent her an email, and it was the HR director. And the HR director said, Mahongo, you used to work here and everybody loved you. And now you're a trainer. We need somebody to come in and train our people. So think about this. Because she left with grace and dignity, even though she was thrown basically to the floor in that forum, she had the opportunity to go back in and make a difference there. And so I want everybody to know it's not if the problems come, if the naysayers come, it's when they come. And the question is, do you already have your response in place? If you are convicted, I'm supposed to do this.
Yeah.
Remember, it's not, should I do it? It's how do I do it?
Yes. And I want to pull out a couple points that you brought there, Tom, though I just happened to peek over at Facebook. We got a lot of people watching here and I see Cindy Santos. She says, somebody told me I could never model or do television commercials and movie parts. I did it for about 20 years. Yeah, that's a great arena for people to tell you, you can't do that. That's out of anybody's reach. Thanks for posting in there. It reminds me too, I want people to just hear real quickly, if you haven't heard it on the show and heard the story about Zig Ziglar pursuing his first sales job and they would not give it to him. Right, Tom? I mean, he was not just this natural out of the womb salesperson. He couldn't get his first sales job. And then he says he got it and he sold really well. He sold his house and his car and all his ownings to pay for things. He says he wasn't doing well, but you pulled out, Tom. I mean, obviously for somebody to look at the testimony, what they see about us, they can't say what ultimately our resolve will be, our commitment will be, our belief will be, even though I say belief though, there's so many people and there's some that testified here who went after something out of resolve, even though they didn't have full belief in themselves. I know, Tom, you're a fan of the book Grit, which talks about that. We think about buckling down, but then you pulled something out there too, and telling that story about we all have the opportunity for personal growth. So here we are now, but you talked about what skill set could you learn? what training could you get to give you the opportunity for something totally different? And we see that in a lot of these stories of somebody who said, yeah, I had a dream of doing X, and yet I didn't know how. I didn't have any training in that, but I went and got it. We can go get that stuff. That's why people come to Ziglar for training and go to other events and go to school and things like that. There was a guy, and it's in a book that I read recently from somebody I had on the show, and I just can't pull it out of my memory at the moment, but he told the story of a guy who dreamt of being in the NBA, except the guy was of Indian descent, and he was like, 5'4" and very slight. And he goes on to tell the story. And today that guy is a chiropractor for one of the top NBA teams. He travels, he's in the thick of it. He absolutely loves what he does. So when we talk about dreaming, we often also, I want people to expand when you say, I want to be a part of that. I want to be in that industry. I want to have something to do with that type of work, to look and get a little bit more broad with how could you be involved in that, as opposed to just the one thing that what if you want to be in the fitness industry, but you think, I just don't really see myself as a fitness model. Okay. How many opportunities can you get in the fitness industry? Or back to what I think her name was, Cindy, I can't remember, that I just talked about over on Facebook, saying that she wanted to be in modeling, let's just say television commercials and movies, whatnot. How many people are involved in TV and movies that are never on the camera? And yet they're sitting there next to the stars. They're helping do this. They're doing so many opportunities within any given desire, or as you said, Tom, dream.
Our good friend Bob Bodine, he's got the same story. He was working with his dad, and he was what we call a headhunter. They would place executives into corporate jobs. Mm-hmm. And Bob was pretty good at it. He really enjoyed it. He loved working with his dad. And he comes back in, and his dad says, how's it going? Because they just placed an executive, and he was doing a corporate tour, right? So they placed this executive. He gets the tour of the building, and he basically says to his dad, he says, I love what we do, but I don't, I'm good at placing executives, but what I want to do is I want to place head coaches for NFL teams. I want to place head coaches for Division I college football. I want to place athletic directors for top schools in the country. He says, I want to tour. I want to walk under Yankee Stadium. I want to go to these different, I want the tour of this, of Notre Dame, of USC or whatever. And so his dad said, okay, that's going to take some work. Let's see you do it. So now what does he do? That's what he does. Right. And so even though it's a shift and it's hard and it's different, and maybe nobody's ever done that before, maybe nobody's ever specialized in that area before, that just means that you get to own that.
Yep.
Right. You get to go for it. And once again, so many times when there's an area that makes, it's a good area to go in, and people are questioning our ability. Well, what happens if we learn everything we need in that area to become successful? Does it translate into other places? That's why I love people who want to improve their speaking, training, or coaching skills. There's not anything in life that you will ever do that speaking, training, and coaching isn't an asset. Mm-hmm. Right? I mean, it will elevate your game to that next level, and what you learn along the way. It's like we've had Bob Tiede on here before, and Bob is the expert at asking questions. Gosh, what if that was something that you really incorporate? How do I ask questions? How do I get really curious? Will that take you anywhere and everywhere? The things you learn when you look at the professional athletes who have a career outside of sports, they'll tell you, hey, it's the discipline. It's the everyday grind. It's the ability to seek out and learn from the best that made me a great athlete. That'll take you anywhere in the business world.
Hey, to jump on that, Tom, absolutely. There are so many people in today's culture who have what they feel like are specialized jobs, specialized positions within companies, that when they lose that position, there's a merger, downsize, whatever, they have no concept of what else they could do. I remember back with my dad, Dan Miller, and his coaching, and so often he would have these people who had, executive jobs, and they get laid off and go, I have no idea how to do anything else. I've done this job for 5 years. And, of course, in his economy, he's going, are you kidding me? We can transfer everything that you've got in there. So for people to hear that, you may need to do the work. You will need to do the work to understand what are your transferable skills. But as you said, Tom, you absolutely have transferable skills. If you have succeeded in any area, you can translate that elsewhere. My gosh, I spent a huge amount of my life, 15 years, for the better part of 15 years, racing bicycles. And then I stopped cold turkey. I started in the 2002. I did my last race in October. That was my last competitive elite race. I do mountain bike races and stuff now, but on the road, that was it. But man, everything I learned there, the commitment, the discipline, the perseverance, the insight, the yada, yada, and all that, I transferred into business. I want people to hear that whatever you learn to do well, create, as you said with Bob Titi, you create expertise in or mastery in. I've told that to my kids. I don't care what you do, just go get good at something. Anything you get good at, what you learn by getting good at that, you can transfer onto the next thing and the next thing. Well, Tom, I got one you're going to like here. You ready? Jessica Moyer. She says her struggle was really self-imposed. So who told her she couldn't do it? She was battling herself. So I want people to hear that. How many people may not have had somebody out there say, you specifically can't do this, but you're telling that to yourself for many reasons. So she says it was more self-imposed that I could not own a boutique style gym. I never thought it was possible, but here I am a year later, loving the impact I have on women's mental and physical health. And I will say that knowing Jessica, now you've spent time with Jessica face to face. I've known her here through Facebook, and I see what she does, and her boutique style gym and health and fitness is just a front for changing people's lives for the better, and speaking into women's lives. And she says, I asked her, did you just believe you could, or did you doubt and fear and do it anyways? She says, I just went for it. I have built up a great following in my area. I got tired of working for someone else, for everyone else. I've not regretted it at all. And there is such a great freedom and honor in owning your own business. This has also given me the courage to work towards my next goals of speaking and writing. Attending the Ziglar Legacy certification was also a catalyst in believing in myself. Thanks for inspiring me. I'm going to take that time for some shameless promotion. Tom, when is the next Ziglar Legacy certification course? I didn't look at the dates.
Yep, it's coming up in November.
Okay.
But we also have our Choose to Win coaching that we do, which is happening all the time. So if you're wanting to do that, Kevin, you can put the links in the show notes. And for our Facebook fans, you can just go to Ziglar.com and reach out. You'll find both of those programs there.
Yeah. Here's a couple just on physical. Thomas Zelensky, he says, I finished a triathlon after nearly passing out. He says, most people thought it was just one more thing I was trying to get involved in, only to dump it in a couple of months. And he says, I had two friends who believed in me, and that's what made all the difference. I want to point out on that one too, that there are times I know when, like what Jessica said, that we have our own history and our own testimony that we look back on and go, look what I did. Look where I failed. Look where I quit. Look where I didn't come through. And we have to make our own resolve that we can change. I mean, back to, it's one of Zig's most popular quotes: failure is an event, not a person. But I understand the gravity of that. If you've got 15 failures behind us, if you've got 15 times where you quit and you didn't come through and it hurt people and it hurt you and you're suffering from that, but still the reality that we have time after time, testimony after testimony of someone who finally got some catalyst. And there's probably, you can make a list of 1,000 possible catalysts. It's different strokes for different folks. And all of a sudden they did do something and they did it differently. They succeeded. They changed, and we've got to give ourselves the benefit of the doubt, the opportunity to do that, to be that.
This reminds me, I was listening to a podcast earlier this week, and it was about a book, and I'm going to get it wrong, but the book was about how to bluff, and it was written by this I think she's a behavioral psychologist, and she decided to become a professional poker player. She'd never played cards like that before, when she started, so that she could read people and understand how people, make decisions. And she was really studying mindset. And one of the stats that she threw out there was that, statistically, the best hand only wins 13% of the hands in poker.
Hmm.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
That most people fold the best hand without even realizing it, because in different types of poker, you don't know what you're playing. I'm not advocating poker. I'm just getting to where the mindset is. So this is what she said: is if you want to win in life, there's different mindsets there. And so what you want to have is you want to have the victorious mindset or the almost victorious mindset. And so this is kind of interesting. So what's the almost victorious mindset? It means this. It means that you evaluate your performance, your playing, your progression in your career, whatever it is, not on whether you closed the deal or won or lost or the business got started, but on how well you played the hand that you were given.
Yes.
And isn't that something? She said, because in poker, the other guy's going to get 2 aces on the draw every now and then. In life, the Mack truck is going to come into your life. And so the question isn't, did I win or I lose? No, that's not the question. The question is, did I play it as good as I could? And what did I learn from it? How can I play it better next time? How can I go to the next level? And so that's what when somebody says, hey, you can never do that, forget that, that's you're not capable of that. Don't listen, right? The question is, if you're meant to do it, the question is not why I should do it, but it's how I should do it. And then when you get into it and you're going 100 miles an hour forward and you get hit and knocked this way or that, those things are giving you new direction. They're telling you, hey, maybe I need to look to a little left or a little right. But what am I learning in that process?
I just love the word capability that you're using, Tom. I mean, somebody can viably testify to what they have seen of us thus far, what we have produced, what we've succeeded in, what we failed in, what our propensities are, yada, yada. But nobody can ever testify to what our capability is, what our capacity is. We get to choose that every day. We get to choose that every day. And I don't want to miss, I'm looking at the Facebook page every once in a while, and I saw a post just a second ago by Deborah Smith. She says, my thoughts told me I could not be a salesperson. I'm not aggressive enough. However, I was noticed for my extremely strong work ethic. I was referred to a company for an interview. I got the job. I am a successful salesperson in the medical field. I was my own worst enemy. It was all in my head. I almost feel a little remiss, Tom, because as I talked, we've talked about in the show how powerful it is when somebody who knows us tells us we can't or shouldn't do something. But of course, as we know, the most powerful and most consistent person talking to us is ourselves and our own doubts. And I do love these stories of people who went after something, even though I want people to hear that, even though they may not have had absolute belief they could do it. I mean, that's kind of the movie, right? That's the Rudy, of some kid thinking, I can do it. I can do it. There's so many people though, maybe even more that I've experienced who have said, I don't know. I don't have absolute belief. I'm just going to go forward and give it my all and then see what happens. It's kind of, like the, who was it? Ruth Sukup that we had on the show, who said, do it scared. You can't always eradicate fear. If you don't have any fear, you're a psychopath. So you've got fear, but can you go ahead and do whatever anyways? Tom, I got a couple more here I don't want to miss. Michael Ida, he says, December 2011, I went to work for someone for the first time in 30 years. I still have my real estate business on a small scale. 18 months later, I was making $100,000 a year at a flooring job. But I gave them 30 days notice and walked away to get back into real estate full time in a city I knew nothing about. Everyone said I was crazy and foolish. Over 7 years later, I'm still going with my real estate business in that town. Also, I run it remotely. None of this has been easy, but when people tell you you can't do something, simply show them that you can. It takes relentless determination. And I actually asked him on Facebook, I said, why? Why'd you leave real estate and why leave the good job to go back into real estate? He says, the job I left was selling flooring and I'm just not meant to work for other people. You can probably relate. Plus the work environment was a bit toxic, not that good. Also, I wanted to be 100% in my real estate business. I just like that story because here he is doing something and he leaves it and comes back to it. And we've seen that happen. And with, people who are in something, leave it, come back to it with a different perspective. I mean, perspective can be everything. Sometimes we don't realize that we are in the right place, but it takes a change to realize that. All right, Tom, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say we had another comment here on Facebook from Danica Trouble. There was a consulting group that I did some work with. This is 20 years ago, and the guy who ran that consulting group, he said, "I want you to meet my team." And we went around and we met all these executives. And he said, "I want you to know that everybody who's an executive here, who's a partner, they were all entrepreneurs, and they all went bankrupt. I won't hire somebody who hasn't gone bankrupt."
Huh.
And I go, "Really? Why is that?" And he said, "Well, they do need to have the after story. I do need to see a pattern of success. But you know what? In business, you just don't get it sometimes until you get it." And he said, "We work with a lot of organizations that are on a thin edge and a thin margin, and they're only going to take advice from somebody who's walked in their shoes and been there." And so what I would say to the people who are thinking, "Well, I could never coach, I could never train. Look at my life. I've made, things have happened to me. I've made some bad decisions." Hey, wait a second. Every single person listening to this podcast, you can change who you are and what you are by changing what goes into your mind.
Yeah.
Isn't that awesome? You can change. You can step into and become the person that God created you to become. And, when I read scripture, Romans 8:28, all things work together for good to those who were called according to his purpose. And James 1, 2, and 3 says, "Consider all joy, my brethren, when you encounter various trials." And so what does that tell me? It tells me that the trials that either happen to us or we create in our own life because we didn't know better, because we got bad directions, whatever the case is, those can be turned for good. And we can then use that to make a difference in somebody else's life. And
yes,
so
go ahead.
Yeah.
No,
So
I thought I wanted to pull out because you just read, you started off there with Danica Treble with her comment, Tom, and I'm watching on Facebook. She says, "I had a friend tell me to my face, I will never hire you as a coach. Your life is such a mess. I can't even understand why you would say you are a coach." And now since then, she says, I'm a Choose to Win coach and a Ziglar Legacy certified trainer. She is doing the work and she is doing a trainer. But I wanted to hit that because we do have so many coaches. You're actively leading the Choose to Win coaching program, Tom, that, back to what you said a minute ago with the guy with bankruptcy, he's going to take people. Now he does want to see a track record that they have had success, since that bankruptcy. That obviously if we're going to coach, counsel, give guidance, we need to have been there. We need to understand the hardship. We do have to have a level of credibility to point to. I had somebody one time, I'll never forget, they says, "Oh yeah, I want to be a career coach. I know what it likes to have a job that stinks. I hate my job." I thought, well, okay, I get the feeling there, but you're going to have some success to speak from that. Maybe you've been there, but now that you got out of that. That said though, Tom, the thing I wanted to pull out for folks though, I have had so many people, and I know you have too, where they discount themselves because they have not reached a level of perfection. Well, in that case, nobody can be a coach, counselor, guide in any way, shape, or form. I mean, my gosh, I have been paid so many times for business consulting. It was business consulting in some specific areas. I am not a business. My wife said, "Honey, you're not really that great a businessman overall." She's totally right. I have a few areas I'm really good at. I can help you in a couple aspects of business, but I'm not the guy for overall. I don't know if there is somebody for overall. but just looking at any area, some of the best counselors, Tom, I've ever experienced are people who went through deep valleys in that area of counseling, whether it's marriage or just, self-image or addiction or whatnot. And to that degree, they're always dealing with that. They're always on the journey as well. I've never had there's not a counselor or a consultant out there that can say, I can teach you because I have reached perfection. I've mastered it. I am the sensei of the world. It doesn't exist. They need credibility. So we all need some level of credibility and overcoming, but please don't discount what you may have to offer because you still have struggles in that area. It's impossible. You get what I'm preaching there, Tom?
100%. I remember, years ago, one of my good friends, his name is Richard Morris, and this guy is an amazing martial artist. He's got black belts, I think, in 3 different areas, and he's one of the top rated in one of those areas in the world. And he teaches Navy SEALs and special forces and police and things like that. And I was taking some lessons from him early on, and he said, "Hey, look, I need to tell you something." I go, "Yeah." He goes, "I'm a pretty big guy, right?" And so back then, I think Richard was like 6'1", 6'2", 200 pounds and fit, right? Could do the splits, kick the door, super strong, massive hands. And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Now, there's some people I won't fight." He goes, "You know what? If Herschel Walker, this is when he was with the Cowboys, he said, if Herschel Walker wanted to take me out, I'd be lucky." Okay, so here's like the best in the world at something, saying that there's always somebody bigger, badder, right? Yeah. There's always a situation we haven't encountered before. And so really the top coaches, the top leaders are the ones who have the humility to say, "You know what? I need to get some help. I need a teammate on this. I need to get some perspective." In other words, they have the humility to say, "I don't have it all." And by the way, politics is just a great place to look of people who think they know it all, right? And see where we are.
Yes. And then we're on the subject of humility. I'll tell you, the coach, consultant, counselor, guide, whoever, who I will respect and trust the most is the one who will also say, "I don't know about a certain area." And I learned to do that in my own consulting, to say, "I don't know, but I bet I can find a resource for you." And I would say that, again, we talk about coaching so often that there is the dangerous pitfall of when you're a coach in a certain area of thinking you have to be the coach and the expert in every area. And as soon as you come off like you can help me in every area of my life, I don't believe or trust you, because I don't think it's possible. Pick your area of expertise and be strong there, and be humble enough in the other areas to go, "You know what? I am not the best expert in that. Go talk to Tom Ziglar." How's that? All right. I got one more that I want to share, Tom, just because it's a great story. Melissa Schneider, she says, "I quit my pharmaceutical sales job 3.5 years ago to pursue my lifelong dream on training horses and raising beef cattle full time. The only family members who supported were, of course, my mom and dad. My in-laws have all but disowned me, treating me as if I'm a burden to their son. All 5 of his siblings have shown their distaste for my life choices as well. It's been a real strain on me emotionally, wondering if they are right. Are my dreams dumb? Should I go backwards? Go back to corporate America with a 401k? Give up on all of this? It's too hard. They all have said 100 times it's stupid. I should grow up and quit chasing unicorns," she has in quotes. To back up this story, I was always gifted in sales, achieving every sales award. But in my 30s, I started searching for true joy in life. I was missing something. I had a great job, great husband, great faith, still miserable. I've always felt my deeper calling was the undeniable gift God gave me with working with animals. I sometimes wonder why I wanted to give up the money to work 10 times harder in Texas heat for a fourth of the pay. But I'm happy, and the profit is growing every month. In the last few months, God has put several people in my life who all needed lessons, not something I was offering or thought I had time to do. I discussed it with my husband and decided to go ahead and accept 10 or so students. Turns out God is doing so much more in the background than using me to teach in using me to teach teenagers to ride. I can see transformation in each of them and their self-confidence. I'm getting to mentor them in many other areas of life and share the gospel with them. It's unbelievable what life has handed to some of these kids, and this 1 hour a week with me is what they look forward to most. 15 years of sales training, my faith in God, and volunteering at church the first year I quit my job has prepared me for this unexpected journey I'm on with these young ladies. My husband's been 100% supportive of each stage of development for our business. We have decided it's not useful to go back and justify my dreams to the naysayers. If they're not happy for me, I do not need their approval. I thank God every day I went for it. How's that?
Boy, that's like the exclamation point.
Isn't it? Yeah.
You know, it's to me, it's real simple. At the end of the day, what treasures are we going to take with us to heaven? Right. And
Yeah,
that's what we should be working on.
Never seen a hearse carrying a trailer full of stuff, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
And you know what? The lives that are changed, those are priceless.
Yep. Yep. And it's amazing when we see somebody go after something heartfelt, like what Melissa shared there, that the opportunity to invest and influence people's lives just goes through the roof. I see the most influence coming from those people who are working at something that they truly believe in, care about, and have joy in. And one more thing though, to Melissa's statement there, that she took a big pay cut going from the pharmaceutical sales job. We have a lot of great stories of people who've done similar things. They left the golden handcuffs, the big fancy job. They went to do something they enjoyed, and they're happier now, even though they're making less money. That said, we also know that statistically, the people who ultimately make the most money are those people who go and pursue something that fits their skills, abilities, talents, giftings, and they enjoy and find meaning in. Chances are Melissa will find herself, just as she's amazed at all this going on, find herself making more money as well. Now, again, maybe not, and she'll be happy anyways, but I do want to put that out there, that the people where we find the most wealth is people doing something that they truly do care about. Just the stats. Good stats,
Absolutely.
Tom.
Yep, absolutely.
Well, hey, thanks to everybody who posted in Facebook as we're talking live here, and of course all the comments that came in and made this show so rich. Tom, it's always a gift to do this with you, brother.
You bet. And everybody, this is Kevin Miller, the greatest host in the land.
Well, thank you for that. I'll accept that, Tom.